right, Donald Trump, as of Tuesday afternoon, is reportedly refusing to negotiate on that Ukrainian mineral deal, which he sees as a security guarantee. Zelensky doesn't, until Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issues a public apology. We're learning this just now, so let's listen to Peter Doocy of Fox News.
I have been told by a senior official here that nothing's going to happen with this minerals deal until Zelensky goes in front of cameras and makes an explicit public apology for the way that he behaved himself. Behaved in the Oval Office with that meeting.
Friday's dust-up at the White House was one of those moments that makes you feel like you're living in a simulation because it was so perfectly calibrated to provoke us. Some have since described it as a Rorschach test. Two people watch something and see something totally different. That's obviously true. In this case, people who claim to have watched the full, long meeting are coming away with wildly different conclusions. It was an ambush from Trump and Vance, or it was a setup from Zelensky, who was always trying to blow up the deal. Those are the two kind of competing views here. I was traveling when the press conference happened. I was actually at an airport and initially only saw clips of the last 10 minutes of the meeting, which were very hostile. But when I watched the full meeting, like all 40, 50 minutes of it, I heard Donald Trump begin by lavishing Ukraine in praise, by praising the bravery of the soldiers. I heard Zelensky accusing Trump of spreading propaganda from Putin. I heard Zelensky challenging the vice president before the American media, implying that his plan was unrealistic. And by the way, not unreasonably so, because it's absolutely true. Zelensky is correct that Putin could violate any deal, even if it meant going after Americans in the mineral industry, which would be in Ukraine. So pragmatically, if Zelensky actually wanted the deal to be signed that day, as he said he did at the beginning of the meeting itself, Zelensky failed to negotiate tactfully. That much is clear. He did not accomplish his goal, and Trump and Vance wanted that to happen. Morally, that's a different question. This is where the disagreement goes deeper. So I just wanted to pause and give a little bit of perspective from an American who was disgusted by Zelensky's conduct, and much more disgusted, actually, by his defenders' reactions to that conduct. And I know many people, especially people outside the US, disagree with me. But I don't think our anger is irrational here. And that's simply the point that I want to get across. Check out this data. I'm looking now at a chart titled Bilateral aid allocations to Ukraine as a share of 2021 donor country GDP between January 2022 and December 2024. This is based on data from the Kiel Institute. While countries like Estonia, Denmark, Poland, and others in the region are way ahead of the US here, the US is also ahead of the UK, Germany, France, and some of the other countries now lecturing the American right for being upset, now lecturing American people for believing, as Vance said, Zelensky should couch any and all disagreement publicly and his criticism publicly in gratitude, nothing but gratitude. Even Joe Biden, one of Zelensky's biggest champions, reportedly, quote, lost his temper on the Ukrainian president in June of 2022, according to an NBC News report from that year. Here's the story. Quote, Biden had barely finished telling Zelensky he just greenlighted another $1 billion in U.S. military assistance for Ukraine when Zelensky started listing all the additional help he needed and wasn't getting. Biden lost his temper, the people familiar with the call said. The American people were being quite generous, and his administration and the U.S. military were working hard to help Ukraine, he said, raising his voice. And Zelensky could show a little more gratitude. Consider that other ardent champions of Zelensky, including Senator Lindsey Graham and people like Mark Thiessen, felt similarly after the Friday meeting, that Zelensky failed to signal his appreciation to the public and to the president and vice president. This is a recurring theme. This is not an isolated event. This is not an isolated takeaway from mouth-breathing MAGA Republicans who you may hate. This is recurring. And if that's how a country spending more than some of the countries in closer proximity feels, despite the giant ocean, as Trump says, the big, beautiful ocean in between the United States and Europe, you may legitimately need to make the United States feel more grateful than you are if you're Zelensky in this case. And if you look at this chart, you'll see we've spent significantly more on Ukraine in 2022 alone, than our annual NASA budget. Now that we've exceeded $100 billion, that's more than the annual budget of the entire state of Virginia. And 43% of government support to Ukraine came from the US overall, while 50% came from Europe, according to a BBC analysis. The BBC, their analysis also found, based on Kiel Institute figures again, that the US support was more from grants than loans compared with EU institutions. So here in America, it really rubs us the wrong way when Europeans in much closer proximity to Vladimir Putin accuse us of being short-sighted or Kremlin apologists or just silly MAGA rubes for taking issue with Zelensky lecturing our vice president on, quote, diplomacy, after the VP noted Russia's destruction of Ukraine, accurately noted that Russia invaded Ukraine, in front of the president, in front of the press, and in front of the world. Unless, of course, it was always intended to be disrespectful on Zelensky's behalf, which, by the way, is fine, but it is very different than arguing Zelensky was being perfectly respectful and was only provoked by Vance. If you wanted Zelensky to disrespect Vance, who has said some very harsh things about Ukraine, then own it. That's fine. If I'd watched thousands of my people die in a brutal war after another country invaded us, and I thought I needed more support than I was getting to save lives and to save my country, I would probably be tempted to be disrespectful in that situation too, even if it wasn't pragmatic. Some great leaders have emotions too, publicly. And by the way, if I were a regular Ukrainian, I'd actually be pretty upset with the US for failing to contain Putin's territorial ambitions. I probably wouldn't be upset with Trump and Vance, who've been critical of those failures. But Zelensky thinks more US support will deter Putin rather than provoking him further, and that's where Trump and Vance and many Americans disagree. We fundamentally, many of us, do not believe the institutions and experts who've spent more money on Ukraine than NASA because they say we risk World War III by not prolonging this war of attrition to the tune of billions, by not risking a provocation that could drag potentially our soldiers into Europe. We heard that about Saddam Hussein. We heard that about Vietnam. We have heard that over and over again for years. Many, if not most of us, actually agree with our friends and critics in other parts of the world. Our country is not perfect. Our country has made some bad situations worse. Many Americans don't even like Trump and Vance, but when they're talked down to and condescended to by people who want American politicians to send more money overseas to fund a stalemate, it sends them through the roof. It sends me through the roof. And I get why that, in turn, sends some Europeans and people in other parts of the world through the roof, too. We got some amazing support after September 11th, and we led much of the West into foolish conflicts while moralizing about freedom and democracy. That helped contribute to the migrant surge. But if you're mad about all of that, know many of us are, too. So here's all I'd ask. Don't just say that Putin taking territory in the Donbass risks our security and expect us to believe it. Please make the argument and treat us like rational, self-interested, patriotic Americans whose wages in many cases have stagnated and don't want to see more of our tax dollars going to a stalemate, and just don't believe Putin's claim to Ukrainian territory threatens our safety and security, even if his invasion is, and it is, a moral abomination. Please make the argument to us in good faith that Zelensky's alternative to the diplomacy that Vance spoke about is better than the mineral deal. Decades of failed leadership has us cynical and exasperated with these platitudes. And I think that's rational. I personally don't love the mineral deal for all kinds of reasons, but also, like all of us, am gutted by the death toll of this conflict. And the very immediate threat of nuclear escalation is frightening. That threat will not go away if America takes a heavier presence in Ukraine's mineral industry, it's true. But it does go down in the near term, meaning we can negotiate the long term and stop the killing so as not to end the war with more deaths and with Putin holding the same territory at a later date, which is a huge risk for the outcome unless there's a massive increase in funding from countries, including European ones, that are already resistant to increasing those levels, according to polling. Now, I don't think Ukraine's allies are wrong to be frustrated with America. I want that to be clear. We've made mistakes. We've made them confidently. But a lot of the frustration with Zelensky actually stems from our agreement in the United States on that point. So all I ask is that you look at our frustration and treat us as rational actors. And I can't promise that everyone in America will treat you the same way, but I hope that if at least we can see where this frustration is coming from, we can actually agree that some of it is coming from the same place. Thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate you subscribing to Undercurrents on YouTube, wherever you download your podcasts. And if you want to join the community over at undercurrents.tv, you get a premium experience with an email address to reach us and special paywalled episodes and more benefits from Unheard. Over there, we'll be back with more Undercurrents soon.